решили наши ребята разместиться внутри планеты. Итог закономерен. Такими темпами у нас в Глушково и ни одного магазина не останется. Решили наши ребята разместиться внутри планеты. Итог закономерен. Такими темпами у нас в Глушково и ни одного магазина не останется.
Russian forces will transfer their aircraft and helicopters from Syria to the Ukrainian front. Most of the aviation consists of Su-34 fighter bombers. This view was expressed by military expert Mikhailo Zyrokov during a broadcast on Radio NV. According to Zyrokov, developments in Syria are a disadvantage for Ukraine because the Russians will redeploy their aviation to the Ukrainian front. The Russians are already transferring or will soon transfer the planes and helicopters they had in Syria to the Ukrainian front. This is obvious. These will be trained crews and prepared technical teams. Unfortunately, the majority will be Su-34s, carriers of guided aerial bombs. Zyrokov explained. Regarding the Russian fleet, the expert believes that Turkey will not allow Russian ships to pass through the Bosphorus Strait. Additionally, it is unclear whether the ships will be able to navigate the area around Gibraltar. In any case, if they are allowed through, the ships will head to the Northern Fleet. That is, they will have no direct impact on events at our front. However, the aircraft and helicopters unfortunately present a concerning situation, Zyrokov stated. It is currently unknown exactly how many Russian soldiers were in Syria. It is likely to be a contingent of several thousand, states military expert Ivan Stupak. According to the expert, there are indeed concerns that the Russian Federation may transfer its air components from Syria to Ukraine. However, the exact number of these troops is not known. There is such a concern. Look, there is no precise data on how many were in Syria, but there are some isolated figures. For example, in terms of personnel, I have seen materials mentioning 2,000 to 4,000 and at most 7,500 people, the Russian contingent in Syria. But we remember that they didn't operate on the ground. They mainly carried out precision strikes with precision weapons, said Stupak. He explained that the Russian troops who were in Syria mainly operated from the air. These were pilots, as Syria reportedly had 20 aircraft and around 10 helicopters. Therefore, I assume, my personal assumption, that it is this air component that will be sent to the Ukrainian front lines to reinforce Russia. So it's not about assault aircraft, although they could send all the assault aircraft right away. For Russia, that wouldn't be a problem, emphasized the expert. He also noted that Russia likely managed to negotiate with Turkey for a corridor to move its equipment. However, this is a very fast corridor designed to transport aircraft and helicopters. I don't know about the S-300, S-400 systems, whether they'll be able to move them or not, the expert emphasized. Ousted Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad has decided to flee Syria under pressure from the Kremlin, which has convinced him that defeat is inevitable. Fearing that Assad will suffer the same fate as Libyan tyrant Muammar Gaddafi, who was captured and killed by militias, Moscow has offered the Syrian ruler safe passage out of the country, according to a Bloomberg article. The agency's sources said that the operation to evacuate Assad from Syria was carried out by Russian intelligence officers. The dictator was taken out of the country via the Hmeimim airbase. The plane carrying Assad flew with its transponders turned off to prevent surveillance. Hours after Assad's escape, rebels entered the Syrian capital Damascus and declared the regime overthrown. The dictator's ouster drew a line under the Assad dynasty, which lasted more than half a century and began with Hafez al-Assad, Bashar al-Assad's father, who has ruled Syria since 1971. The agency also learned of Russian dictator Vladimir Putin's dissatisfaction with the activities of his intelligence services, which failed to notice the growing threat to the regime in Damascus in the first days of the rebel offensive. Russian aircraft struck them But then the Kremlin realized that it would not be possible to save the Assad regime due to the virtual inaction of the Syrian army on the ground. Now, Russia is trying to maintain its bases in Tartus and Hamaymim by contacting Syrian opposition groups that have established control over Damascus. The agency also mentions talks between Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and the Turkish and Iranian foreign ministers in Doha. The day before, the Turkish resource Clash Report wrote that the Syrian rebels allegedly do not mind if the Russian Federation maintains its presence at the bases in Tartus and Hamaymim. In turn, Russian propagandists reported that the Russian bases are completely blocked by the opposition, but negotiations on their fate are still ongoing. Meanwhile, satellite images showed that Russian ships were at anchor in the Mediterranean Sea, 8 kilometers away from the port of Tartus. Russia is scrambling to save face after its humiliating loss of its client, dictator Bashar al-Assad, and the Kremlin has conceded preserving its crucial Syrian military bases will take time and delicate negotiations with groups it was calling terrorists just days ago. Russian military bloggers bitterly attacked Assad for the loss of Syria, but Russian analysts argued that it was Putin's preoccupation with the war in Ukraine that resulted in the loss of focus on his Syria project. Russia's recent failure to recognize the fragility of Assad's military was also a new low in a series of disastrous intelligence failures that have discredited Russian intelligence agencies. Russian attacks against Ukraine with guided aerial bombs have fallen over 50% since Western partners allowed Kyiv to target Russia with long-range missiles, the independent Russian outlet Agents Vo reported on December the 12th, citing reports from the General Staff. US President Joe Biden gave Ukraine the green light to attack Russian territory with ATACMS missiles in mid-November. Within days, Kiev reportedly also launched British Storm Shadows into Russia for the first time. Russia carried out heavy guided bomb attacks against Ukraine from November the 1st to the 20th. Agents Vo reported, citing daily updates from the General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces. Russia dropped at least 100 guided aerial bombs per day during that period, with the exception of only one day. Those numbers fell significantly after November the 20th, according to General Staff reports. Russia dropped 138 guided bombs on November the 20th, marking the last time that Russian aerospace forces targeted Ukraine with over 100 bombs in a single day. Russian aircraft have launched fewer guided bombs on Ukraine in the first 12 days of December. The number of bombs topped 50 on only 5 days, according to the General Staff. The average number of bombs per day is now 40 or fewer. Oliver Alexander, an open-source intelligence analyst, said the decrease was likely due to the threat long-range missile attacks posed to Russian airfields. The Russian military may have been forced to move their Su-34 aircraft farther than 600 kilometers from the front line to avoid ATACMS strikes, affecting maintenance, sorties rates, and flight hours, he said in a post on X. Guided aerial bombs are precision-guided munitions that have a shorter range than missiles but are far cheaper to produce. President Volodymyr Zelenski lobbied aggressively for long-range strike permissions in order to target Russian military airfields amid intensifying aerial attacks. There is a clear trend. After each Ukrainian attack on the airfields where Su-34 fighter bombers are based, the number of bombs launched decreases for a short time. There are other patterns as well. After the attacks on Russian air bases in August, the intensity of attacks on regions that had not previously experienced such a density of attacks, such as Sumy and Kherson regions, increased several times. Due to cheap components and the impact of EW in urban areas, the actual accuracy of the Russian aerospace forces' guided bombs does not correspond to the declared 15 meters. This significantly increases the risks to the civilian population.